How's it going, truth seekers, skeptics, and anyone else who may be listening? This is Designated X, the channel dedicated to bringing the very best of the unexplained. We are back again with an odd, unexplained, and hair-raising account of the unnatural. Real quickly before I start though, if you could please hit that like and subscribe button and share this post on social media or with any like-minded individuals, it sure would help a lot and I definitely appreciate it. Thank you all. Alright, let's get going.
Are you familiar with the so-called X-Files?
I believe they have to do with unexplained phenomena.
More or less.
Convention and science offer us no answers. Might we not finally turn to the fantastic as a plausibility?
Logically, I would have to say no.
This encounter I took interest in because not only the cryptid involved a goat man, but also because of the location of the sighting, Prince George County, Maryland. It's been the home to a number of reported goatman sightings over the years. The account goes as follows. One night, about 10 years ago, me and my best friend decided to stop by a local hangout of ours in Bowie, Maryland to smoke a cigarette before he dropped me off at home. We grew up here and spent our early years wandering the railroad tracks and woods, smoking and drinking as children do. So this one spot is at Railroad Overpass 450 and 197. There's a parking lot and a small area of grass and trees. About a 30-foot strip of land separates the track and the lot. So it's nighttime and we decide to go there to smoke a cigarette. We go on the tracks and we're facing the parking lot, so the overpass is to our left and the tracks go on to our right. This way, we're still barely in the glow from the yellow parking lot lights. Now we're smoking and he's talking, but the entire time I'm focused to my right, peering down this track because I have the strangest feeling. I didn't know what it was until later. It was the feeling of being watched by a predator, which I've never experienced before. After about 2 minutes, we're almost done, our cigarettes, a helicopter flies right above us, seemingly at tree level, with the spotlight briefly going right over us coming from the direction of the overpass. Not 5 seconds later, I hear the gravel shift from between the tracks and I look towards the overpass. Standing right in the center of the overpass, there's this giant silhouette. Now since it's dark and it's under the overpass, I can only see its silhouette, but it's about 8 or 9 feet tall and burly looking. It appeared as if its head was attached to its torso, completely bypassing any semblance of a neck, the way super jack dudes look. It was huge, and we only looked at it for a second before I said, "Let's go, now." Now we hurriedly started rushing away, and we hear the gravel move closer, and not 3 seconds later, we both hear the most demonic, horrifying, multiple pitch screech literally right behind our heads. It came from no more than a foot behind us, so of course we book it to his car. And no, we didn't look back, because are you effing kidding me? Get real. We got to his car, and funny thing, his lanyard got stuck around the steering wheel. Anyways, we drove around for an hour. Only thing we could think to say was, "What the F?" And that's my encounter with the goat man. The witness then goes on to add these details shortly after the original sighting. Now a week later, we're hanging out with our friend. Let's call him Andy. Now Andy has spent a lot of time in the woods, and he was telling us about how last week the cops were out in the woods because they heard screams and thought a woman was being raped. I asked him if they had helicopters out, and he said yes, and I asked him what day it was, and it was the same night we saw the goat man. We told him our experience, and he said yeah, that was him. I've spoken to a few others who have actually seen it and give a similar description to mine, as well as a picture found online if you search Bowie Goatman. The second encounter can only be described as a tree person. Back in the early 90s, I went with a group to Silver Falls Springs in Oregon. One night after dinner, I went for a stroll to find a clear spot so I can see the stars. After about 20 minutes of sitting quietly and contemplating the sky and stars, a breeze blew through and rustled all the trees and branches around the clearing. As the wind gently shook the trees, something caught my eye in my peripheral. I looked to my right, and there it was. For just a second or two, I saw what could be best described as a walking tree. Back then, I was just beginning to appreciate books, so at the time I hadn't read anything aside from the comic book or magazines. Today, I can describe it looking like an Ent from the Lord of the Rings books and movies, except it had more of a round head, with a definite neck attached to shoulders. Its limbs were long and thin. It could probably touch the ground if it just relaxed its arms down. There didn't seem to be a distinction or separation between the torso and hip area. The legs looked like a pair of articulated tree trunks with no discernible feet, and it had patches of moss randomly covering its torso and legs. It was about 20 feet in height. It was holding what could best be described as a long, baseball-like club in its right hand going over its shoulder. When I first turned my head to see what had caught my eye while the wind rushed by, I saw it take 3 long and deliberate steps into a spot where the clearing met the trees, and what then sent a chill down my spine and made me freeze for what seemed a moment of forever. And that second was that it seemed like it turned its head and looked right at me and where I was sitting as it took its 3rd step and re-entered the forest. I sat there for another 10 minutes, feeling frozen in place, going over what I had just seen. Once I shook that frozen feeling, I got to my feet and went back to the cabin all of us were staying at as fast as I could. I only told one person about this after it happened, and they just found it to be a very nice and creepy story before everyone turned in for the night. It still haunts me to this day when I think about it, and that's from a user, the Michael, from the channel Beyond Creepy. Our 3rd and final encounter is dealing with ant people, possible alien abduction. I found it interesting just because it came up when I was researching the ant people for my last video, and it's just a strange encounter. It goes as follows. When I was a young child of about 3, in 1965 or so, I started having dreams about once a month that there were big ants in my room walking like people and coming up the side of my crib and looking at me. I remember one morning as my dad was getting ready to go to work around 5 a.m., I ran into the kitchen where he and my mother were drinking coffee. My dad picked me up and sat me on the kitchen counter and asked me how I got out of my crib. I told him the big ant man let me out. Now, I'm not saying I was abducted by aliens or anything like that, but this did happen for about a year, and my parents were finding me sleeping all over the house. Once in the Rambler in the carport, they started tying me down at night in my crib, and every time I got out, and I don't ever remember getting out on my own or anyone else letting me out except for that one time. I'm in my late 50s now, and I remember this clearly. I would never say that I thought I was abducted by alien, but some of the circumstances could suggest the possibility of it. However, as soon as you even mention in any seriousness that you have a feeling or that you know you've been in contact with beings not of this world, you are going to be labeled as crazy or a weirdo, and life can become even harder for a person living with this kind of thing. I'm not saying that I did have some kind of contact with beings other than humans. I don't know. I don't have any vivid memories of being taken anywhere out of my house, even when I was sleeping in the car. What I remember is what could most likely have been a reoccurring dream of human-sized ants being in my room and in the hallway of our house, leading to the bedrooms. What kind of bugs me, that's a pun, is that the more I think about it, the more I think they could have been grays and I wasn't dreaming. The problem here is that I have been exposed to media all of my life and can't tell if it's just my mind remembering things this way and my thoughts have been influenced by the media reports I've seen all my life, starting with the Betty and Barney Hill abduction, or if this was in actuality real. I still wonder if that was what happened. I was adopted, by the way, and none of my family members or my brother, who was also adopted, remember anything out of the ordinary. I can't say that I had contact because I just can't be sure, but something has kept this interesting to me for this long without any concrete answers, and I just get the feeling that there has always been something either watching or in my life in some sort of hidden way. I served in the military and came close to being killed a few times, and wasn't because of somewhat freak circumstances I won't go into on online post. I also had pancreatic cancer 15 years ago, and after 9 rounds of chemo and many radiation treatments, it just continued getting worse. Then, in a matter of 6 months, I went into remission and have been cancer-free going on 8 years. I had a heart attack when I was all alone at home, what they called a pretty major one. I lost consciousness after I was able to call 911. My front door was locked, and I am positive I locked it because I was headed to bed when the heart attack happened. I always lock my front door and all the others too. The EMTs walked right in the door and it was unlocked, and I was saved from what could have been certain death if I had waited any longer. How was my door unlocked? You got me, RT. And those are our encounter stories for today. Some rather strange ones to be sure, but let me know what you think down below. If you have an account or personal encounter of anything odd and unexplained, whether it be ghostly visitors, a sinister stranger, cryptid or unknown entity encounters, demonic or angelic visitation, extraterrestrial contact, or anything else unexplained, feel free to contact me with your account by sending an email to designatedxshow@gmail.com. See you in the next one. Peace.